Good evening. Welcome to our board meeting for Grand Blanc Township. Mr. Atkins, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'd like to see if we can get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda to start with.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Good motion and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And now we'll move on to approval of the regular agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, Ms. Lane, would you like to introduce your new deputy clerk?
It would be my pleasure, Mr. Supervisor. Gentlemen, under the consent agenda, you approved the contract for me to be able to hire the person of my choice who you kept hearing me say, I can't find anybody, but I found a very qualified young lady by the name of Lynn Henry. Lynn Henry, this is the Township Board, and just give them a short overview of your experience.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, how I started was back here at Grand Blanc Township in 1989. I was filling in for maternity leave, as most of you know. My mother is Peggy Nolde. And so they kept me on here. I ended up working in the clerk's department for a while for Darlene Woodbury and Lorraine. Then they wanted me to stay a little bit longer, and I went to the building department. So I was here for about 3 years, and then I had left. And I went back into government 6 years ago. I'm the city clerk for the city of Linden. I have my certification through the Michigan Municipal Court Clerks Association, so I'm a CMMC. I am also working on my CMC, which is through the International Clerks Association. So I've had my certificate for 3 years and just was recertified this year. I am looking forward to coming here. Right now where I work, I only have 3,066 voters, and I'm moving to 28,000. So I've been looking to emphasize more on elections, and I really enjoy the election part of my job, getting away from minutes and meetings. I do a lot at the City of Linden. As you know, being smaller, I can do HR, payroll. I know all the stuff on BS&A. I can do some assessing records and, different things. So I'm very multitask. I am very capable of doing a lot of different things, learn fast, and I am looking forward to working with everyone here, and especially working with Mrs. Lane.
Anybody have any questions, gentlemen?
Well, thanks for being here. Welcome to the team.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've also told her she didn't have to wait through this whole meeting.
Okay.
All right.
And that's her lovely daughter, Skylar. Gentlemen.
Hi there. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
You like working elections?
She already does the elections, yes. I'm a pro
Okay.
at it now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Next generation.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to have a privileged comment here with recognition of an individual that has served our township for, I think, more than 17 years. And he probably knows his history a little bit better than I do, since he's been around longer than I have. But I know it's 17 years, and I'm not sure if that's all on the ZBA or if it's been on a few other commissions. But Mark Palazzo, come on up and say a few words, and we want to recognize your efforts.
Thanks a lot, Scott. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Mark Palazzolo, and I spent the last over 17 years on the Zoning Board of Appeals here with Grand Blanc Township. And I just have to say that it's been an honor and a privilege to be appointed by the board over all these years, the different supervisors that we've had, Ms. Lane, Ms. Hoffman, Mr. Zittel, Mr. Bennett, all of our township trustees, our past zoning administrators, Mr. Laddie, Mr. Lamata. There are two individuals that kind of pushed me to apply for appointment for the Zoning Board of Appeals, Lee Townsend and Cal Hutchinson. I do remember the time when, right after I met with Lee, and soon after our meeting, he was tragically killed. And it kind of shook me at that point in time. It was before I got on the ZBA. But, I couldn't have asked for anything more, though. I was looking for, I guess, to get more involved, and they kind of urged me to get involved. And thankfully I did. I was just a young guy at that point in time, and I didn't have much understanding as to how the whole system worked. And when you get involved, and I urge other people, if they want to get involved, here's an opportunity to, apply for vacancies on the various boards, apply for public office. You'll find out soon that there's a lot of people that are out there to help you and help you understand how everything really works. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions as to how, local government works, and I think it's really imperative that everybody really understands so that they know and become better informed. So that's one of the things that I did when I applied for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And over the years, I had a lot of people help me out, and all of my colleagues. There's a lot of deliberations that we had, and a lot of different issues that came up. The Deer Park issue. There were all the variations of the sign ordinances and master plan issues, and so I've seen everything. Of course, the Trillium development there on Holly Road, here on Saginaw and Dort. So I've seen a lot of history here. My wife and I, Karen, and my mother-in-law here to my left, we're building a new house in Fenton Township, and we're soon to be moving in there. So, I'm again just really honored and privileged to be able to serve everybody here, and of course the public. That really is who I responded to, and I think history has shown that I did my very best.
So a couple of questions, Mark. What was probably the most challenging thing you've seen or experienced with the township over the 17 years?
Wow, it's just, I think just you'll find that there's some people that, the lack of understanding, and people that should have an understanding as to how the ordinance work, builders and the developers and everything, and sometimes they want to kind of skirt the rules, and sometimes you kind of catch them when you're asking questions during deliberations and public hearings. It's like, well, why didn't they go, apply for a permit, and this would have been known to you, and you wouldn't even have to be going, to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So when we see that type of stuff, really kind of questions like, gosh, why? It becomes unnecessary, and then it becomes a burden on the homeowners that are often trying to get a variance, because oftentimes they have no idea. So they're relying on their contractors to follow through with the process properly. So they end up getting hurt in the end with having to bear additional costs for going in front of the zoning board and all of those, and the risk of actually potentially losing out on their application.
So any words of advice for our township board as we appoint people to the ZBA and move forward with development?
Just keep moving forward, and I know whatever decision it is that you're going to make will be the right one. You can't go wrong, and especially, even if it's a younger person that doesn't have any experience like I did, or if you have an experienced person that has a ton of experience. I think there's different perspectives depending on who you decide to appoint, and I'm sure everybody would be looking forward to their input.
Yeah. One thing that I really appreciate that Mark was able to help out with was, even on social media, was with regard to residents that get into a discussion on issues with planning and zoning and appeals, things of that nature. Right. And Mark would come to my rescue and say, well, let me give you a different perspective on how this really works, and so rather than hearing it from you.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people that still don't have really quite an idea. You try to educate them, but if they have a blind eye, come to the Zoning Board of Appeals, come to the Township Board meetings. You'll get an understanding, you'll learn. And just get more involved, and you'll probably even have a much better understanding. I learned a lot through our Citizen Planner course, which I still get emails from. That was all worthwhile. So yeah, we had a lot of a lot of different experiences through the years, and I oftentimes even people that I work with, they'll ask me questions about zoning and building and all these kind of things. So all that experience has helped me out in my everyday life too.
Right. Well, 17 years is a heck of a long time to provide your services to our township, and we very much appreciate it. We want to present you with an award, and we'll get that to you, but in the meantime, we had to get a picture presenting this, and
Wonderful.
we want to thank you for your service. So.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You might have to come back and keep an eye on you guys, though.
Okay.
Mark, I had the privilege of voting for you when you were first appointed to the Board of Appeals. And while doing the minutes, I do want you to know that at the last zoning Board of Appeals, they spoke very highly of you and treasured all of your decisions that you helped make. So your colleagues truly respect you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy. I appreciate it. I know you've been through, every year that I was here, you're always there and always there for lending hand, lending ear also. I know you're highly respected here, and I hope everybody understands that.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
We'll be in
Best to
touch.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, we are going to open the floor now for citizen comments, and we'll start here in the front of the room. Yes, Mr. Thewalt. The Historic Commission.
Yeah, I'm Bill Thewalt. I live at 7046 Iris Court in the township. I'm here tonight as the secretary of the Grand Blanc Historic District Commission. And I'd like to start off first by thanking the Board of Trustees for the approval of our strategic plan at your last meeting. We look forward to implementing that. Our next step is to develop plans and strategies to implement what we've put down on paper. We'll begin at our next meeting and we're continuing over the next 6 months. The priorities that we have to start with, we're going to be looking at education and awareness. And those are the things that we'll begin our fleshing out the plan with. The second item, we have been reporting to you for probably a couple years now about getting a historic marker for the Perry property. I'm pleased to say that the state has approved our application, and we're expecting a letter before too long on the installation of it. At this point, we don't know whether the state pays for the installation of it or if we have to come up with the money ourselves. So in thinking of that, we have a backup plan that we're going to be investigating some sources of money should the obligation fall on the Historic Commission to put that sign up. Another thing about the sign, the state doesn't use the term homestead, and we've been calling this the Perry Homestead for probably as long as we can remember. The problem is the word homestead came from the Homestead Act that the federal government passed a long time ago, and it turns out that the Perry House was built before the Homestead Act was enacted. So it can't be called a homestead anymore, and the marker will read, instead of homestead, farmstead. So we don't have much choice in this. The state kind of just tells us what our name's going to be. So therefore, at our last meeting, we voted to change the name to Perry Homestead Park and Nature Trails instead of the Perry Farmstead Park instead of Homestead. And there's much we can do about it. That's just what the state mandates. But we can look forward, probably, we are hopeful that by our October open house, we will have a sign on Perry Road talking about that long historic home. So, thanks to you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Well, congratulations on the sign, first of all, and your work on that. Mr. Thomas?
I just want to say thank you very much for your continued support, but I do have one question, and since you're here tonight, I was going to
Sure.
speak to Debbie Honay tomorrow. How are we doing with the RFPs for the kitchen?
At the last meeting, there was a delay on this because of the specifications. The other is there seems to be some doubt on the need for a kitchen in that we no longer can use that to hold events.
I apologize, I didn't mean the kitchen, I should say the kitchen area.
Yeah, yeah.
Area.
Well, I interpreted that to be the
Okay.
kitchen area, yeah. The things are still there, I mean, and they're available for use. It still needs a floor
Yep.
and, the cabinets,
Yeah.
and we're looking to having that done.
And Mr. Thewald, I think, you know, the strategic plan and following that, you know, is fabulous. I think that's exactly where the board wants to go. The kitchen's probably secondary at that point. I mean, I think the educational value that we talked about
Yeah.
and your direction on that is absolutely, which won't require a kitchen, I think is the direction that this board liked about your plan.
Yeah, well, that's of
So-
course what we have to do. I mean, we're cognizant of the fact that we're a creature of this board and we have to
Right.
follow
I think
that.
it'll be a great use for that facility.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else, anybody else? Congratulations, I know you guys have worked tirelessly for years on getting that designation, so that's huge. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
celebrating that going up.
I still don't know whether it's gonna be a small sign like at the corner of Perry Road and or the Perry, what's the Perry, old Perry School building, or whether it's gonna be the traditional Longside size. So we don't know that. We'll have to wait and see.
We want a real big one.
That's our hope, is that it's a big one.
If it's too big, you have to go to the ZBA for a variance, remember?
We know some people on that group. So, okay, moving towards the back of the room. Yes. Please come forward and give us your name and address and
My name
Hello.
is Jessica Smith. I live at 5945 Greenwood Road, apartment 5311 in Waterford, Michigan, 48327. I am the Green Party candidate for the 14th State District this coming November. I'll be on the ballot. I am coming out to every single one of my 15 cities and townships board meetings, at least one until the election, and then once elected, I plan to attend at least 3 every year thereafter, because they all tend to sound on the, or fall on the same days, so it's really hard to hit a lot of them.
okay.
I have done at least a last decade as an election worker for Genesee Township. I've been really active with local things in school. I've been, involved in different things, and I also got the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate approval last month. I am asking today because I'm trying to run a kind of a grassroots campaign. I'm not doing a lot of big campaigning. I'm not doing a lot of big money thing. I'm trying to put the service back into public servant. So I'm calling to ask, or I'm here today to say if there's anything you guys need volunteers for, if you have a park cleanup, if you have an animal rescue fundraiser. I want to be out physically helping in the community, showing that, that's where politicians should be, I feel. So I have slips of paper with contact. I'd also just like to follow any of your guys' Twitters, your city Facebook, so that way I can see when events are and hopefully come out and help you guys out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Why not? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Attorney Tabitha Marsh, and my address is 30006 Gregory Street, Grand Blanc, Michigan. And I am one of the judicial candidates for the Seventh Circuit Court for this year, 2018. The Genesee County residents this year will have the opportunity to select 3 new circuit court judges. And there are 8 candidates running in what we call the open race for 2 seats as a result of the retirement of 2 of the circuit court judges. I am not in that race with the other 8 candidates. In my race, I'm in what's considered to be the incumbent race. And in this race, there are just 2 candidates. As a result, we will not appear on the primary ballot in August, but we go straight to the general election in November. in December of 2017, Judge Archie Hayman retired, and in February, Governor Snyder appointed someone to that seat. I am running for that seat, specifically because I think that the Genesee County residents should have a choice as to who they would like to see and make decisions on their behalf as a circuit court judge, as opposed to having that decision made for them by one individual. And so my candidacy is about the people. It's about giving our residents the opportunity to choose their next circuit court judge. I also think it's important to note that I am from Genesee County. My family has 4 generations of family members from Genesee County. From my grandparents to my parents, I was born here, and my husband and I are raising our children here as well. In fact, we've had several children matriculating through the Grand Blanc School District. And I think that's important that we have someone who has roots in this county making decisions for us. Because when we have that, they tend to be more careful about the decisions that they make. Because when you're making decisions that potentially affect you, your children, your grandparents, your parents, your friends, your coworkers, then you'll think twice about the decisions that you make and the impact that you'll have as a judicial public service and servant in this community. I'm a graduate from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I have a bachelor's in business administration from there. I also attended Michigan State University College of Law. Upon graduation from law school, I came back to Genesee County and I clerked for 2 of the circuit court judges, Judge Michael J. Thiele and Judge John A. Godola. I also worked for a couple of law firms, and I opened my own law office I incorporated my law office in 2008, which is still operating today. So I have many different experiences in the district court, circuit court, and the probate court for Genesee County over the past 14 years total, as a law clerk and as an attorney in private practice. I have served on, I'm still a member of the board for the Flint Children's Museum. My family is pretty active in doing work of the ministry and volunteering in the community and things of that nature as well. So I do have some cards here, if I could pass them out or hand them to you all so that you have more information about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha.
Yes.
Good luck. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Bring them on up, Tabitha.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was
Thank you.
You didn't tell me that.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
It's nice to meet you.
Okay. Any other public comment? No more public comment?
2 of my favorite people here, Doc Winford and Ed, they're not going to speak.
Okay. If there's no other public comment, we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes.
So move.
Okay, motion made.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda we've already approved. We're going to move to operational issues. The board will consider a resolution to add 6 streetlights to our contract with Consumers Energy. These lights will be located on Topaz Circle in Gemstone Valley. Township has received payment for the installation from Pulte. We discussed this on Tuesday, and Mr. Sears, our DPW director, had noted that payment had been received, and the contract is ready to be signed with Consumers. Mr. Massey?
Let's finish this, and I have
Okay.
a question in
I
regard to
so
the
moved, Mr.
consent.
Chair.
Okay.
I'll second.
Well,
I'm
and,
sorry, who seconded?
Mr. Guzak.
Oh, thank you.
So we have a motion and seconded. Ms. Lane, it's a resolution, so.
Yes. I didn't know if you needed time.
No, his
to-
question isn't regarding this, is it?
No, it's not regarding
Okay.
this,
Oh.
it's something else.
All right, I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure.
In the consent agenda, I have a question.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I have a comment more so than a question.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey? And
Yes.
myself, yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
So you had a procedural question, Mr. Massey?
Yeah, I have a question for the superintendent. in regarding to the DPW buying the new system, is it possible when we get ready to replace old technology with new technology, it will state whether it's resellable or not?
There's resale value?
Yes.
Sure, that's not a problem. This particular is outdated and there isn't gonna be any residual value left with the equipment that's behind. I don't believe, but to do that, we have to declare it surplus. We have to go to the show. I mean, we actually, there's a format that we have to follow for declaring surplus property. I have to declare it, and then the board will authorize us to sell it if there is. So it will come back to the board if there is any residual value that we think that we could possibly sell.
Okay.
So in other words, if we're replacing equipment, there is a procedure for disposal of it, and it follows that process. If we're going to basically sell it or dispose of it in any manner, it follows a procedure.
We have to account for it, because then in the audit, we have to account for, be able to show the paper trail that the board authorized the surplus equipment sale, and then we would put it out on the bids for resale.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good question. Okay, item B, the board will consider a motion to approve planner Mark Lloyd's application packet and associated fee to allow temporary parking on private property in conjunction with the Allied Challenge Golf Tournament from September 13th to September 16th, 2018, and allow staff to begin accepting and processing applications. Our task force that is working with the attractiveness of an appeal of Grand Blanc Township, we discussed some things to welcome individuals coming to the area, whether it's banners or temporary things of that nature. I had a discussion either yesterday or today with Mr. Limata and our building and planning director, Mark Lloyd, and they felt we can do that. They would like to do that separately rather than adding something to this particular item and have that in time for the tournament. So I did address that with them. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this.
Okay. All right. We discussed this at length on Tuesday, Mr. Mansour.
Yep, so in follow-up to that discussion on Tuesday, we talked about wanting to be transparent and fair with people who are making applications and to come up
Yes.
with a specific criteria that's used to approve these. Has anyone seen that? Have we got a draft of that somewhere to be included here?
You do not, and unfortunately, planning director Mark Lloyd was unable to attend this evening due to a family issue that cropped up. He was unable to attend. We did talk about it after the Tuesday meeting and discuss what the exact agreement will look like, and we can incorporate that into the information that gets handed to each applicant so that it talks exactly about what the requirements are. And I think we can get that back before the board before we start to hand these out so that you can see what exactly the parameters are that each individual will be looked at before approval.
I'd appreciate being able to have that, so we have like a complete package. And
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Lloyd came to me this morning and said he wouldn't be here tonight, and when I spoke to him about that specific issue, he said, yes, if the board approved this, he would put a complete packet together. So he, as of this morning, he was made aware again of the importance of having standards, especially for those that live in the area that would have friends parking in their driveway versus people who would be renting.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion. It was seconded, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item C, the board will consider a motion to adopt the Charter Township of Grand Blanc hiring policy, which covers all hiring for township employees, both union and non-represented.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Atkins made the motion.
Second.
Mr. Massey seconds it. Now, we discussed this at length on Tuesday as well, and I don't know that there was anything outstanding in our discussion from Tuesday. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I guess because I have been more accustomed to having a budget be a guide, I was wondering if the board would consider that for the 2019 budget year, that only active employees be in the budget, and then during the year, if any department head needed additional staffing, that would come beyond the budget, rather than having a vacancy. And then my impression was that if there is anything marked vacant in a budget, that authorizes the superintendent to go ahead and hire. And because we oversee the budget, I would prefer to have the need for a vacancy filled come separately from the budget.
I would rather, I mean, when we budget something at the beginning of the year, I want to see the full picture. I'd hate to have surprises come during the middle of the year in any department. I mean, with regard to the police, for example, the budget had right in it from the description from the chief, as well as when we went through it, the narrative actually laid out what our need was going to be during the course of the year. We also stated when we would have additional employees hired in that department, and so it was laid out very clearly any positions that were budgeted for and what the need was for those. I'd hate to have a budget that really isn't complete, and then during the course of the year, hey, we need an employee over here. Just totally throws off how you go about budgeting. I'm sure Mr. Limita has a few comments on that as well. Mr. Limita?
That would go against any concept of putting a budget together, and certainly putting your projections together. We have to deliver a balanced budget, and if we have any vacancies, what you'd be asking me to do is deliver a budget that's balanced, knowing that we're going to have to go in and then scramble to make amendments. You clearly, when you put your budget together, it's not an authorization to spend. It is a roadmap of what it's going to look like, and it would be completely irregular to try to create a budget with known vacancies on the horizon and to leave them out. It sounds like a solution in search of a problem. I'm not sure what you're looking for, Clerk Lane, in what this hiring policy isn't any different than the current format that we follow. There's nothing in here that's a deviation from our current practice now. So I'm trying to figure out what it is where your concern lies.
Mr. Massey?
Yes, I don't know where Clerk Lane is going with this, but let me explain my experiences. And I'd like to hear from some of my other colleagues on their experiences. I have put together formatted $1 million budget. I have never come across a budget with over 5 companies which I have worked for that was set up along the lines that Clerk Lane is talking about. There have always been budgets. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. You hear many times on the radio, in the news media, I probably should say, that a company is laying off 200 people. Most of the time when a big company announces that it's laying off 200 people, it's really not laying off 200 people. It's what they call open cards for hiring. Different companies have different definitions for it, okay? They just retrieve those open cards, which nobody's really physically laid off. So what Clerk Lane is referring to, I've never heard of it, and I don't understand it. And I would never support anything along those lines.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
I agree with Clerk Lane, but I don't think it has what she's saying, but it's not, it has nothing to do with the procedure at hand or the motion at hand. I think it's something that we would look at when we go through the budget and when we have our workshops where we come in and we speak to department heads. And I think what Clerk Lane's saying is that they present their budget to us and they make their recommendations. Our superintendent makes his recommendations, and then the board makes our recommendations. And that's how it worked the last cycle, and I assume that's how it's gonna work this cycle. Superintendent Limita, am I correct? What I think Clerk Lane's trying to say is that when we get into the budgeted next month or so, when we meet with the department heads, at that time, we give them, I don't want to get into the operational and stick into the legislative, but what I'm saying is that when they present their budget, what they would like to see, who they hire, when they hire them, and such, that's our time and our opportunity to ask questions. Am I correct, Superintendent Limita?
Sure. When we deliver the budget to the board, we'll have all the positions that are anticipated for that budget year, that fiscal year, included in there. You always get the list of all current employees, and then if there are any anticipated, or if there's known vacancies, that position will be listed, it'll say vacant, or if there's anticipated vacancies, then you'll see it'll say a vacant position. So the budget package you get has all current employees plus known or anticipated vacancies. You have a narrative from myself, you have a narrative from the department head that's requesting why would be an increase of a vacant position. You have all that information at that time would be the time for the board to question the feasibility of that vacancy or that position.
Budgeted.
During a budget discussion, and then like last year, we had a vacant lieutenant's position that was to be filled in no earlier than September of 2018 for the police department. That was delivered, the board looked at it, we discussed it, it was in Chief Wiles' narrative, it was in my narrative, the logic behind it, and then the board approved that position moving forward. It hasn't been filled yet, but we anticipate that it will be filled by the fourth quarter of 2018. For an example, that was the one vacant position that we delivered to you guys last year.
Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo a little bit of what Mr. Massey said. Yeah, in business, you absolutely do budget for positions. That doesn't necessarily mean you fill them. And I think the last thing you want to ever do is open up a budget after you've, I know this board will spend a lot of time going through that process and approving that. Last thing you want to do is open that up in the middle of the year. And my short amount of time experiencing some of the managerial skills of Mr. Limita, I'm pretty confident that any open positions that are in the budget, he will do his absolute due diligence and not just arbitrarily hire people because there's open spots in the budget. So I'm pretty confident about that, but I absolutely do not support revisiting the budget after we've already approved it and closed it.
Chair.
Mr. Lane?
Well, I understand everybody's, what they're saying. My concern is if there were an economic downturn after we've approved a budget, and suppose some of us or all of us felt that, gee, we couldn't hire somebody, but it's my understanding from Tuesday night's discussion that would still give Mr. Limita authorization to hire. And I'm just saying, if there's, if we get into a tight budget.
Well, let me just say that I know this isn't a business that we're operating here, but I guess to use an analogy of a business, Mr. Limita is our CEO, and we're charging him with the daily operations of this organization. And I guess if Mr. Limita wants to have a balanced budget at the end of the year, and he feels he can do that by hiring people, if we were short on money, I would say he would probably be knowing what's going to happen at the end of the year. So I don't see where somebody that's of sane mind would hire additional people when budgets are being trimmed. But I think this goes back to, I believe, what the role of the board is versus the role of our CEO or our superintendent. And our superintendent's role is to make sure that we stay within the budget, and that the goals that we've outlined, or I think the three questions whenever we're looking at something, whether it's Parks and Rec, whether it's fire, The three questions that come to my mind that we've talked about in policy governance is what good, for what people, at what cost. And Mr. Lehman has that in his mind at all times, and we've hired him to fulfill what we've set out as far as what good we want to achieve at what cost. And we know what people, it's our residents. So I'm confident that he's going to continue to do that, and I have very little concern that he'll hire people if we're on a budget year that is not meeting our goals. So with that,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I'd like to make a comment. So no one leaves here thinking that the comment that Clerk Lane made is realistic, the last comment, which I do not share those views. If there's an economic downturn, there may be a need to hire a specific person for a specific task based on the economy, okay? I've seen that happen. I've worked for 4 or 5 different companies, large companies, okay? And they have hired during economic bad times for specific needs.
Sure.
So I don't want no colleague leaving here thinking, okay, if there's an economic a downturn, okay, that we may not hire no one.
Right.
That's not necessarily true.
May change some hiring priorities.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I don't know. Anybody have anything else new on this? Are we ready to take a vote? I think there was a motion that was seconded.
Yes, it was.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to what we're hearing from the community. I think what we'll do this evening is start down at Mr. Mansour and work our way this way. If there's anything you've heard in the community, anybody down there have anything that?
No, just a few people I've talked to have been excited about some of the things going on in the community, the Ally Challenge, and in the broader sense, things going on with inside the city in terms of some of the programs they have. So I think to the extent that we can support those in the township, they'll be likewise well received.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Folks are very excited that the roundabout is open.
Okay.
Heard that a lot today.
All right. I went out and tried it out. Mr. Atkins?
Hearing good things from a select few people in regards to the DDA, looking forward to what it may attract. I think a lot of people, and for sure myself and the township and the city and other areas in Genesee County would like to see some higher end establishments and also some job creation. I was talking to a few people the other day, and it's interesting because if you think about Genesee County, years ago, it was people would go south for the job. And now you're getting a little bit of a shift where people are coming north to live and raise their family and also look for jobs. So it's exciting, and I'm hoping that there'll be other businesses that'll match up to that to provide entertainment districts and some more choice of some higher end restaurants. And I think we have some good things with some hotels coming, and I think they know there's going to be a need to offer those services and house some people. So hearing good things about that.
Thank you, Mr. Guzak.
I don't know, I've heard a lot of good things about the roundabout, and of course, some people are complaining the taxes are out again, but they are out, so.
I got stuck in the roundabout for about 45 minutes. I couldn't.
Ms. Lane?
Well, I can thank the board for hiring a very qualified deputy clerk for my office to fill in when we lose some very valuable people in August. I can also inform people that if you need an absentee ballot, please call us and we'll send out the application. We have already sent out over 2,100 ballots, and I left samples on the counter so that people that need an informational sheet can check it so that they can respond and be prepared even if they're going to the polls. And I would remind people that at the last minute, if you leave work on Friday and your boss says you have to be out of town that weekend, you can come into the office 9 to 2 on Saturday fill out an application for an absentee ballot, and get one immediately, vote it, and turn it back in so you don't lose that opportunity to vote.
Thank you. Mr. Massey?
Yes, what I'm hearing from the community, I do not want the board to lose focus on the overhanging limbs from the trees.
On Embury Road.
Yes.
We'll see, I'll see where we're at on that. They have a whole list of things, believe me. I've got a sunken sewer at the end of my street that my neighbors are reminding me of too, Mr. Massey. With that, we'd like to probably go through our committee reports real briefly. Mr. Mansur, anything on Planning Commission?
So, a couple things. First off, Planning Commission didn't meet in July as it was a holiday week. So I'll move to the Metro Alliance. The last meeting we had was June 20th. So there's 4 things I wanted to briefly go through there. First, there's a fiscal year 2020 call for safety and high-risk rural road projects. I believe that the township's been notified about that, and we have until August the 6th to turn in any requests for changes to the road to improve safety, again, to get it included into fiscal year 2020 budget. Second is, what is the second here? Oh, we did not receive the beautification award. They went to Lennon, City of Mount Morris, and Thetford Township. Unfortunately, we didn't have the level of response to get that.
Well, it was on a per capita basis.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Number of responses per capita there, so
So if you
we're
have 200 residents and you have 20 people.
Yeah, then it's all good. Okay. I'll go past that. I think the last thing is that MDOT now is going through and starting their I-75 corridor study, which is going to go from US 23 to Court Street, I-69, then I-69 plus or minus 4,000 foot, and its construction is going to begin in 2026. So that's something that we should kind of keep our eye on there. I'll keep you informed as they go forward and begin to plan what kind of improvements and changes are going to be made in that area. I guess last thing is that the Metro Alliance is taking the rest of the summer off, and our next meeting is going to be in September. Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Mansur. Mr. Thomas, Parks and Rec?
Parks and Rec meets next week. Well, we reported the last meeting in the month.
Okay. Mr. Atkins, anything on ZBA?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Mr. Guzak, anything? Treasurer's Office? Ms. Lane, anything to report?
I already
Okay.
gave our report.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey, anything with fire?
Yes, I'd like for as many board members as possible to attend the next fire commission meeting, and that's July the 17th, if I am correct on the date.
Okay.
6.
The 17th, July.
6 p.m.
Yes, 6 p.m., prior to the election.
Okay. We have a millage coming up beginning of August.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll hold my comments to the end. Mr. Limata?
Just a couple things. I sent an email out later this afternoon or early evening in regards to the budget process. There's a lot of attachments included, but especially with the new board member and Mr. Adkins, and again, this is the second time around for you guys with this coming through. You'll see the transmittal that I send out to department heads. They'll be receiving it either tomorrow or next week. But I wanted you guys to see it. It also includes a timeline in there, so when things are happening, so that you guys will be able to see that and know the process. I included the capital project planning sheets. There's a form that they have to fill out. We've got a 7-year projection rolling form that goes with it, and a transmittal that goes with that, so that you would see that as well. It's a new process, like I said, for some of you. And we instituted that about 2 years ago, so they've got 2 years under their belt. They're getting better at it. It helps us determine how much money we need to set aside into our capital planning funds, so that we have enough to meet our future needs. The way it was handled prior to is we would throw money in there periodically from excess fund balance, and then it was kind of, we'd throw so much in there every year during the budget process, and it was a free-for-all towards the end of the year. People hadn't used up their capital request funds, then other department heads were jumping in and trying to grab it, and so we instituted this process upon my arrival where it's much more formalized. We've got a long-term plan put out there. They have to rate it on whether it's immediately necessary all the way down to deferrable. You'll see that whole process. I'd encourage you to take a look at that and then look at what we have, because it kind of shows you what kind of capital needs projections we have out for the next 7 years. And then we'll see what they want to change at the issue when it comes through. And then just for general informational purposes, I included a couple of informational items from the Michigan Townships Association on lawful expenditures for townships. It's one of the things that we have to guide by. We can't spend any money unless we can point to a specific statute that allows us to spend those funds. And so it's just kind of an FYI for you, just as a refresher as we move into the budget process. We've got some economic development activity. I appreciated Trustee Adkins talking about the excitement from the DDA, and we'll see what occurs. I don't know if I can directly attribute it to our conversation about the DDA, but I have had recent contacts over the last couple of weeks, and it's been very encouraging. Just this evening I sent out a packet of information on the township and some property, and as well as the market assessment study that we had completed in 2016 on a very large parcel with a realtor who has a client looking for something that would be very significant for us. At least it's exciting at this early stage to see that. We've also had some more activity on the South Holly Road Industrial Development District for people looking at property along there, where we most recently have Magna under construction, and the board granted us the ability to expand that industrial development district to the east side of South Holly Road. It has opened up some opportunities, and we have some people knocking on our door. Exciting opportunities, and again, maybe or maybe not directly related to our conversation about the DDA moving forward, but very positive steps regardless. And then, Supervisor Bennett, I just want to remind you about your commitment to Director Edison from the Parks and Rec about.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Yep, I'll bring that up. Mr. Laddie?
I don't have anything specific, but I will send out, I know it's a little bit early, but I'll send you out a rough draft of the proposed ordinance for the DDA, so you can take a look at it. It's interesting, I think, only in its, it has a lot of references to the state statute and the requirements therein. But it identifies a number of appointees to that, and I know that Mr. Bennett has begun to think about, and I think other board members have begun to think about who may be well qualified to fit on that board. So I'll get that out and let you take a look at it. I think we're only maybe 30 days into our 60-day period, and we can't adopt this ordinance until after that 60-day period. But we'll get you thinking about it, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Laddie.
Mr. Bennett, may I ask?
Sure.
Attorney Laddie or Mr. Lehman, has any of the taxing jurisdictions responded whether they're opting in or opting out?
I haven't received anything.
Nor have I.
So we haven't heard anything, and of course, just as a reminder, they do need, their governing body needs to come together and pass a formal resolution to opt out, and we received no information from anyone at this point.
Do they usually wait until the end, do you think?
It depends on how bad they want to get out, but I think that for the most part, because they get to maintain exactly where they're at now as we move forward, they understand that, when we looked at that information, I love bringing it up, Grand Blanc Township is the economic driver in Genesee County, $1.5 billion SEV, the next closest being Flint Township at $800 million. We're nearly double, and I think they realize that we are a very big driver of the economic activity that funds their revenue stream now. So I think they would, behoove them to partner with us moving forward, and I believe that this is going to move through. Not hearing anything is very promising after 30 days.
Okay, Mr. Lehman, then may I ask you, on behalf of the board, I guess, to reach out to those taxing jurisdictions and provide them with whatever information they need that would encourage them to make a positive decision for themselves and for the township, so that we don't wait and for them to respond, and if there was something they needed that, they're on the fence, which way should they go?
We've had discussion with some of them already.
Okay,
process
And we'll
is fully in
continue.
place.
okay, thank you for that.
Okay, just a few items. One is that I think, talking about economic drivers, we had a little bit of a discussion at our last meeting with regard to parks and recreation. And this is combined with what are you hearing in the township. You drive by Bicentennial Park last weekend, and there were, what is it, Dennis, 90 teams that were there from
Over 90?
90 from throughout the state of Michigan, which, I don't know, I think we figured probably translates into maybe 20, 25 people per team, something like that, easily. All staying in probably local hotels, eating in local restaurants. I know we posted on some social media, the fact that we have a couple of new hotels being built in the township, and we had some residents, Paula could probably tell you, that question, why do we need hotels in Grand Blanc Township? I think these tournaments alone will show you what happens on the weekend. But I think I asked Ms. Hudson at a meeting recently to, we need to look at the economic impact that the parks have as well on our community and what we can do to further that. And I think also the county may be able to help us with that as well. If maybe this is, it's great, but maybe we can make it even better, right? And build on that if people like coming here for tournaments, what have you. One of the things that discussion also spurred was the idea we are in the midst of scheduling these outside boards to attend our meeting, whether it's our appointees to the GDL or to the McFarland Library, to the Metropolitan Planning Alliance, the Fire Commission, what have you, to come and present as well as us have a discussion with them. But one of the ones I felt was a priority was Parks and Rec. And so what we're going to look at doing, we're in the midst of attempting to do, is actually at our next board meeting, which would be on the 24th, I believe,
Yes.
is to ask our board members if they might be able to meet slightly earlier on that night. And if we can, we'll probably dress a little bit more casually, but take a trip out to Bicentennial Park and take a tour of the park, and as well as come back and meet with any of the park's board members that are available, and kind of like what we've done with the Planning Commission, is to have a joint meeting with their board members. Might not be the entire meeting, but a portion of our meeting. We're still putting that together and to see if they're available. But would that be something, I just want to get a consensus of our board, if that would be something that
That's a good idea.
I'd like to see happen. I just would rather, I don't want this to become an adversarial thing. I want it to continue to be, it's got to work for everybody, and we have to work together. It's our park, and they help us manage it, so I want to make sure we keep going down that path.
Thank you for letting me know tonight, because I didn't have time to call the photographer, but Mr. Atkins asked me after the last
Oh,
meeting
okay.
about having a picture, and then you say dress casual. We
Right.
had that problem last winter.
Right, well,
So if
we'll
you're,
work that out.
okay, so that we agree on what night
Yes.
we can have a picture
Right.
taken.
So those are a couple of the things that we're working on with our outside boards to make sure that.
What
we
day do
stay
you
in
plan on
communication.
meeting with the commission?
That would be at our next board meeting, so the 24th, which is the fourth Tuesday meeting. I did have my first KWA board meeting this month, and we basically went over some of the financial information, and actually the sale of the bonds went extremely well for the KWA. Some very substantial savings in the tens of millions of dollars. So the bonds, actually the sale went much better than they had anticipated, and so they were able to do much better on that sale, which lowers the cost for all of us. So I'll send out that financial information to our board in case you're interested in that. That's all I have. Anybody, Mr. Laddie or Lehman, anything further? No executive session this evening, so with that.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Let Lon make a second motion.